On today's episode of Locked On Suns, the moment we've all been waiting for, a full Phoenix Suns offseason preview. What is going on with the second apron? What are the checklist items the Suns need to take care of? And of course, who should they be targeting? Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons and the host of the Just Basketball Show wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen to kick off your Monday, kick off your week. The Suns offseason continues. Thank you for being here and joining me for that offseason. Wherever you're finding the show, hit follow or subscribe. We're free and available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube. Hit that button. You'll get a new episode in your feed every single Monday through Friday throughout the offseason and beyond. A lot going on. Get locked onto the Phoenix Suns right here from now through October when we do this all over again. We got a lot to hit on as far as the Suns offseason goes. Player options for the free agents that are in place, extensions, new contracts, who do you keep, who do you get rid of, what do you do with the 22nd overall pick, what the heck is the second apron, and what is it even going to allow the Suns to do, if anything? We'll get into all of it today. Today's show's guys is brought to you by PrizePicks. The easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA when you make your first deposit to get it matched up to $100. Okay, let's start with the biggest items, the most pertinent pieces of information, the most pertinent decisions that the Suns are faced with, and then we'll go to the longer term. So first up, they already got the Grayson Allen extension done. For those who may have already forgotten about that, he was obviously signed like the first Monday after the season ended to a 4-year, $70 million contract, which means that he cannot be traded until October 16th, 6 months to the day from when he signed that deal, meaning that they're going to have Grayson Allen on the roster opening night. Now, next deadline, we can cross that bridge when we come to it, but for all intents and purposes, Grayson Allen is going to be on this team next season. They also have a Kevin Durant extension to consider here, right? That's the other first order of business. Now, he doesn't need to sign it immediately, but he does have to consider if he will want to sign it, and that is a 1-year, $59.7 million extension. Talked about this last week with Brandon Kleen as far as what's going on with KD this offseason, and frankly, why you've heard some of the rumor mill start to develop around him, right? Because similar to Jimmy Butler in Miami, this type of moment of opportunity, hey, do you want the extension? Will you sign it? No, I won't. Yes, I will. Donovan Mitchell, of course, in that boat as well. It just creates an inflection point of, is it being offered and what does the players say? But we haven't heard anything there. It's just going to kind of be sitting in the background. The reason it's 1 year is because of something called the age 38 rule, meaning that a player can only be signed to a certain type of contract up to that point, and then after that, the rules kind of change, so you can't sign players through that birthday. You basically have to treat it as two different rules, and therefore, Durant only has 1 year left beyond what he's currently signed through until he turns 38. Next up is the player options, okay? So, if you remember last summer, the Suns signed several players to 2-year deals, technically, giving them a player option. I'll go into detail of why they did that, only because it matters for why they might do it again this summer. Okay, so there's two things. One is it obviously gives players a little bit more control. The other is that it gives them more guaranteed total money. So it's a way for the Suns, given that because of the apron that they're in the new collective bargaining agreement under the new salary cap, they don't have at their disposal a mid-level exception or a biannual exception or a taxpayer mid-level exception. They only have minimum contracts. But if you give players 2 years with a player option on the second year, especially if they're kind of in this, what's my place in the league kind of situation, which is what, a Drew Eubanks was or, a Damian Lee was, for instance, you're basically giving them the flexibility to make up to, $4 or $5 million instead of just the $2 million. So you're just doubling their money, which might sound obvious, but again, is a way to be more competitive with other offers. If there's another offer out there for, Drew Eubanks, for instance, or some of the players we're going to talk about later on in this show who are free agents this summer that the Suns might pursue, somebody wants to give them $4 million, you give them a 2-year, $4.8, $4.9, $5 million offer, whatever the math ends up ringing out to, with a 5% raise on year 2 and that player option, you're able to give them a competitive offer to a 1-year deal elsewhere for similar or even maybe less money. Now, not every player wants that. Some players like to go be free agents again because they bet on themselves. But as we look at who the Suns have in that boat right now, those names are Drew Eubanks, Eric Gordon, Damian Lee, and Josh Okogie. Okay, so Drew Eubanks has already said the Suns want him back. And frankly, I don't think any of these other 3 players are going to be in high demand. Now, we'll see if Eubanks is right. I believe he said that before they even hired Mike Budenholzer, so things can change. But even if we just include Eubanks and we look at all 4 guys, they didn't really play at a really high level. It's hard to say that. Damian Lee had a career-threatening injury. Josh Okogie got hurt and never really got his role back, although we know he has some value. Drew Eubanks, similar, not like he's at the point of, is he not even going to be in the league next year, but I don't know if he has a for sure good opportunity with guaranteed money elsewhere on the table. And then I do think Eric Gordon would have the most likely path to a role on a different team next season, but he was just way too inconsistent this year. So, last summer, he said he turned down offers from Dallas and I think maybe even the Warriors for more money or more years, and the opportunity to play a major role for a championship contending team this past season is what made him come to Phoenix. I would say almost all of these players, except Damian Lee, who I think will probably just opt in because, frankly, I'm not sure coming off that injury and considering how his career has looked. He's had 1 season where he was a real rotation player outside of injuries forcing that. He probably opts in. The other 3, I would say it's probably 50-50. That brings us to the players who are actually free agents, which are Royce O'Neale and Bol Bol. Let's start with Bol Bol quicker, since he's quicker. He's an unrestricted free agent after basically his first season being a consistent winning rotation player. You look at what he could be for this upcoming season, and I honestly could see Mike Budenholzer getting even more out of him. You just think about what Bud has been able to do with length and size as help defense, put him in the dunker spot as potentially kind of a dump-off guy, maybe hopefully get his offensive rebounding to an even more consistent level if maybe he can add a little bit of weight or just get used to playing around NBA bodies. And then obviously a floor spacer, which Bud is big on. The Suns can, even though he's a free agent, the Suns can offer more than the minimum because he was on their team last year. And if they were to go the same route of a little bit of a raise from last season plus a player option for next season, which would be combined to be like $4.9 million, or let's just say $5 million. That's a pretty competitive offer. I would offer that to him. Hope he doesn't get a better offer elsewhere. And bring him back in and see if you can get an even better season. The guy is still, he's not the youngest player anymore, but he's still very inexperienced. And so you're hoping that as he gets into his prime age-wise, you're able to get the best years from him. So offer him that 2-year deal with a little bit of a raise from last season, player option on the second year, and hope that chance at $5 million in guaranteed salary is enough to say, hey, maybe another team has a small contract on the table for you, but here's what we can do. And maybe the familiarity clearly has a relationship with Durant. I actually could see it happening. The next guy up is Royce O'Neale. We'll get to his situation. I have 4 comps for contracts, and I'll tell you what I think he might get coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by Yahoo Finance. Let's get straight to the point. You want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising costs of inflation, pay off your debt or your mortgage, pretty much anything standing in the way of you and financial freedom. Well, with Yahoo Finance, you can get access to the news, data, and tools that you need in order to help reach that financial freedom. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or are looking for that extra guidance to get yourself started, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They are the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including news, editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments, creating a comprehensive perspective, setting you apart from great investors. And it's how Yahoo Finance will ensure you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month already, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial analysis, financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor. YahooFinance.com, the #1 financial destination. YahooFinance.com. That's YahooFinance.com. Alrighty, let's keep the show rolling. Talking Royce O'Neale. He is up for a new contract. The Suns have his full bird rights, okay? Meaning they can basically spend as much as they possibly want up to, a max contract to re-sign him. Now, he's not getting a max, but I do think he'll probably get a raise off of the $9.5 or so million that he got paid this past season. Now, obviously, when you're talking about any money the Suns are spending above and beyond minimums, that's going to add to their luxury tax bill. So it's not just about how much you're paying Royce or how much of a raise he's earned or whatever. From the Suns' standpoint, that mentality, or I guess that thought process, I should say, has to consider what that hit will be on their tax bill. Okay? That being said, you don't trade for him and give up what they did in order to just let him play half a season. He didn't play amazingly in that first round. Nobody did. But ideally, if you're able to upgrade the rotation ahead of him and he's not your 6th man, but maybe your 7th, 8th, 9th man, you feel a little better. And he's certainly a capable player. We look at last summer. Joe Ingles got $11 million guaranteed with a team option for the same $11 million from Orlando. So, okay, there's one. Not identical players, but I'm just picking and choosing some forwards, some combo forward, older players, all right? George Niang, $26 million guaranteed from Cleveland last year. Jalen McDaniels, not Jaden, Jalen, the older one, $9.3 guaranteed million from Toronto last summer. And then last but not least, Sasha Vezenkov, $20 million guaranteed from Sacramento in order to convince him to come from overseas and finally join the NBA. I think the Suns will give O'Neale more than any of that, partially because he's probably better than any of those guys at this point, but also because just like the Suns kind of know they need to sign him, his agent knows that as well. And so they have a little bit of leverage here. What I would do, and what I think the Suns will probably try to do, is spread O'Neale's contract over 3 to 4 years to take a smaller hit each season, keep him around as a tradable contract for a little longer. He is only 30. And allow yourself to give him a nice guaranteed offer without having to shove that into a year or two. Okay, so the ballpark that I went to, again, remember, he only made $9.5 last year, so you can still give him a raise without getting too crazy. I'm thinking somewhere between what he made last year and this year's mid-level exception, which is about $12.5 million. meaning 4 years starting at $11 million, raises each season, gets you to about $47 million guaranteed. So that's almost double any of the examples I just gave you. But again, he's younger than some of those guys, better than all those guys, and has leverage. So starting at 11, $47 million total, you get a role player back, and I would guess that's probably about where it ends up being. Unless he gets a mid-level type offer elsewhere. Crazier things have happened, but there's not a lot of teams that want to be spending that on him. We'll see. Okay, I have some free agent targets and some trade targets to throw your way to close out the show. But before we get there, I want to remind everybody about the apron rules, because the Suns players, who do they keep? What do they keep? What do they have in front of them roster-wise is one part, but the CBA and the limitations that they're facing is another huge part of what this offseason is going to look like. So, 5 things the Suns cannot do under this second apron, okay? They cannot combine outgoing salaries. Forget the word aggregate. That is, I feel like, part of what trips people up because that's not a normal word we use. Combine. So, they can't combine Nasir Little and Jusuf Nurkic to get to a bigger salary number that allows them to trade for somebody who makes a lot of money. They can only trade either of those players on their own. They cannot take in more salary than they send out. So what if you're looking at the amount of money Jusuf Nurkic is making up until June 30th, or what he will be making starting July 1st, whatever time the Suns want to trade him, if they do that, they can only get back the exact same amount that he makes or less. They cannot get more. They also cannot send out cash in a trade. They cannot acquire a player in a sign-in trade. And because of all the picks they've already traded, this isn't really because of the apron, but it's just something to remember. They have the 2024 and 2031 first-round picks at their disposal right now, or they will have that this summer, but not until draft night, okay? Because that makes it so they're no longer trading consecutive years of picks because they already have given the 2025 pick to Brooklyn. Instead, they're just trading basically the rights to a player at that point. And then once you're on that draft night or later, that 2031 pick becomes available because it's now 7 years away. I know it's a little messy, but those are the basic facts of what the Suns are dealing with. A couple other things. I mentioned already, they cannot use the mid-level exception, only minimum contracts. There's $16 million into this second apron already. So if you're part of your idea, I'm sure a lot of Suns fans are out there like, well, why don't they just get out of it? They really can't. Even if they let Royce O'Neale go and just replace him with a minimum player, they're still pretty far away from, they would have to trade Nurkic or one of the big three for nothing, basically, to get out of the second apron. And then you're just making your team worse. And who's going to do you that favor? You don't have a lot of assets to attach. It wouldn't happen. And then if you think about a little bit of what the Suns are doing this summer with a Royce O'Neale contract, or if they trade for somebody, a draft pick, even if they were to take a player at 22, they have to be thinking about next summer as well. Because if the Suns go into next summer over the second apron, which is where they are right now, their 2032 first-round pick, which would normally be, now we can trade that. No, in this case, because they will have been over this apron line for multiple years in a row, their 2032 pick doesn't become available to them. It actually gets sent the opposite direction. It gets frozen at the end of the first round and cannot be traded. There are ways to unfreeze it, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Trade possibilities, as a reminder, Little plus the 2024 and or 2031 first round pick, Nurkic plus the 2024 and or 2031 first round pick, and that's about it. James Jones said this week, we're not trading the big three. He said, I think there's no scenario under which they would do that. basically echoing what himself and Matt Ishbia both said in their end of season press conference. So, and we mentioned Grayson Allen cannot be traded. So that's kind of where things sit right now, all right? They have very limited means. They're up against it, but they want to get better. Not going to be easy, but we'll talk about who they could go after, both in free agency. I have my top 10 targets as well as at 22 in the draft, and a reminder of some of my favorite trade targets, all coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by PrizePicks. Get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money with PrizePicks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. You can now win up to 100 times your money at PrizePicks with this view's 4 correct picks, turning $10 into $1,000 with basketball, hockey, and more on PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. PrizePicks is super simple to play. Make your picks, submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types all make PrizePicks the #1 fantasy sports app. In addition, what I love most, you're not playing head-to-head, you're not playing in a league, you're not playing in a pool. It is simply you versus the PrizePicks player projection. So, really, just tap into what your brain thinks. If you have a hunch on something or you have a little stat that backs up what might be a good one to go after, all you got to do is put some money on the more or the less as far as each stat for each player goes. If you get it right, the money rolls in. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com or the PrizePicks app. Promo code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Today's show, guys, also brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make every moment more with FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, player props, money lines, and more. I have some for you as we look at the NBA Conference Finals. We already have Game 1 odds for both the East and the West. The Celtics are 10-point favorites at home in Game 1. That doesn't track with, I think, what we saw as far as fight from Boston versus Indiana. I don't have Game 1 for the West yet, of course, but minus 460 money line. I mean, it's not the best you're ever going to do because I could see Boston, of course, winning that game, but the spread feels pretty nice. Get something in your account with those bonus bets and then get to work getting those earnings and winnings even higher. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Time to get to my top 10 free agency targets. I've held off with free agent specific names in most of the episodes since the season ended, mostly just because it felt too early. We didn't even know who the coach was going to be. We didn't have clarity on what the parties might be. We've gotten a little bit. I think we know how Bud wants to play. We know what players he's succeeded with in the past. We know now that trading the big three doesn't seem to be an option, and they have interest in retaining Royce O'Neale. So, that's some dominoes that have fallen. With that said, my main targets as far as the Suns offseason goes and what most of these players will fit into as far as a type of NBA player is point of attack defender who can handle the ball and initiate offense. So it doesn't, the guys on my list are not the traditional point guards, but they are players who can do those things. And then size on the wing and at forward and center depth. Basically, everybody falls into that category. Now, you might be thinking that's kind of everybody. That's every type of player. But look, I'm not looking for bucket getters. I'm not really looking for smaller shooters, So they have that. They have those things. They don't have the three I listed. Chris Dunn's #1. I think if the Suns came away just like I felt last offseason, hey, get Eric Gordon. This summer, I feel like get Chris Dunn. There's a plan B to him that I'll get to, but combining the fact that he has a track record of really, really solid defense. He's big, so a lot of point of attack defenders, you're getting a smaller player who can just chase guards around. I think he can guard, 1 through 3 most nights. He can handle the ball. He can get the ball, deliver it to the right player to just set up offense. He can probably push in transition, which we know Mike Budenholzer likes to do. So to me, he should be on the top of the whiteboard in those Suns offices. Number 2 is a reach. I don't think he's going to become available, but I just want to put him up there because I want to be on the record that this type of player, and this player in particular, is a high priority for me. Trendon Watford, all right? He's in Portland. He played really well against the Suns a couple times. If you remember, he's 6'9". He plays solid, high IQ defense and uses his size and length well on that end. He's not an incredible, volume three-point shooter by any means, but he can handle the ball a bit with his size. Kind of a point forward guy, earlier in his career, and shot 39.7% this year, 39.1% last year. So it's low volume, but he can make them when they're open and would just be a perfect bench player here. A little bit of overlap with Royce O'Neale, but hey, that type of player is valuable for a reason. That said, he's on a team option. So Portland would be kind of stupid to let him go. I just wanted to put his name out there. Number 3, our final other type of player that I mentioned before, Goga Bitadze. All right. I think he's the best gettable center on the market. Orlando already has Wendell Carter. They already have Mo Wagner. They even have Jonathan Isaac, who plays center. They even have Paolo Banchero, who theoretically could play some center. Goga wasn't even in the rotation in the playoffs and could be the odd man out. He's huge. He can protect the rim. He plays, solidly in dribble handoff situations. Probably the best comp would be a better defensive Jusuf Nurkic, but without maybe the strength, without maybe quite the level of post defense, without quite the level of playmaking, but pretty similar. DeLon Wright, number 4, pretty much just that plan B to Chris Dunn. DeLon Wright, maxes out as a, lead guard defender and just a ball mover on the offensive end, but Suns need that. Number 5, another guy with the team option, but a little more of a roster crunch than Portland has, and somebody who hasn't played much as this team has leveled up, and that's Lindy Waters III from the Oklahoma City Thunder. 6'6" shooter who fit really well with their size, but frankly just had too much overlap with Isaiah Joe, I think, for them to keep moving forward with him. He was on a 2-way. He got elevated up. Again, team option. They could easily just keep him, but if they want to kind of, take that next step as a team, maybe it makes sense to let him go and fill those roster spots with different types of players. They also have draft picks every year that they have to figure out what to do with in terms of roster spots. Number 6 is kind of a wild card. I have to admit I'm not incredibly familiar with his game to the level of how much is he benefiting from Nikola Jokic. But Vlatko Čančar, he played a legit amount last season in the regular season for Denver. Wasn't in their playoff rotation much, because they cut down to Jeff Green and Bruce Brown basically being their main guys, and then Christian Brown. But Čančar was set to be a solid guy for the Nuggets this year before getting hurt overseas in the FIBA World Cup. He plays with Luka's team and just had a nightmare injury, tore his ACL and had to miss the year, but he's kind of in his prime, brings size, can shoot. He turns the ball over a ton, which is the one downside with him, but if you could cut that out, have him maybe handle the ball less and be in a smaller, more specific role, a big 3-and-D-ish forward, okay, I'm sold. Number 7, KJ Martin. We know the Suns have wanted him for a long time. He finally got a shot with Philadelphia when Embiid was out and they needed, just depth when at times next to Embiid this year after the Harden trade. And I think his offensive game needs to develop if he's going to have a role in the NBA. He's small, so even the defense, he can force turnovers and kind of use his athleticism, but if he can't, guard smaller players and be a, run through screens and on-ball guy. It's just he's at an inflection point, but that's kind of the type of player you want to bet on, and we could see him blossom. Number 8, Sandru Mamukelashvili. He was the guy, if you remember, running around out there with Victor Wembanyama part of this season. He's undersized for a center, but it's really a lot of the type of guy that Bud has gotten the most out of. If you even think back to Pero Antic and guys like that, not to mention Al Horford, of course, becoming more of a shooter and all that sort of stuff. Bobby Portis, not quite the same type of guy, but of course, Brook Lopez. No matter the size, Bud has been able to make shooting bigs work, and Mamu does bring post defense, and if he can just kind of execute on that end of the floor, maybe you put him out there with size and try to balance it out. He's just a different type of big than what maybe a Drew Eubanks would be, and he's young, so he could get better. Gary Harris, number 9. I don't love it just as far as the reason he's at 9 and not higher despite his talent. The reason for that is he's very similar to Grayson Allen, and if Eric Gordon were to stay, he's similar to him as well, not to mention Beal. So, but, and I guess Damian Lee, right? But if they lost Gordon, if they, didn't feel like Lee was actually going to play and they just want shooting, fill out their bench, Gary Harris can still knock down shots. He's recovered from his injury well. He's not a high-level defender, but he's a vet who makes sound decisions. He was out there in the playoffs for Orlando, and you could do a lot worse. Jeremiah Robinson Earl is number 10. I've never been a huge fan of this guy. He, is kind of a combo 4-5. Offensively, he doesn't score that much. He's not a great athlete, but I think if the Suns could treat him as more of a 4 and have him increase his volume as a shooter and maybe just benefit from that volume and team defense and size, you, again, could do worse. The draft, I will run through quickly because, again, I'm not an expert. I used to pay a lot of attention to the draft when the Suns were picking in the lottery, less so, of course, lately, but there's a handful of older options I think they could draft at 22 who could contribute as rookies. And I just want to go through the names to get your mind in the same place as mine. Centers, Kel'el Ware, Zach Edey, Kyle Filipowski. Forwards, Tristan Da Silva, Jameer Watkins. Guard wing, Devin Carter, Kevin McCullough. Those guys are all at least 20 years old and all have attributes that are a little more developed and that would fit with this Suns roster, not to mention, of course, just positionally, they fit. So there's names to get your mind kind of churning. I will repeat to you that my preferences at with the trades, if the Suns were to trade their picks, I'm just more and more sold on the idea of taking a player at 22. I don't think the Suns will do it, but I'll just tell you that's what I would do. As far as, trades, I think if they were to put the 2031 pick on the table, I think they could get Grant Williams. Maybe not the sexiest in terms of personality, but hey, could be worse. Norman Powell, I know he's not a huge fit. Maybe they could get a player like that. Otherwise, Peyton Pritchard, Kenrich Williams. I went through all these names in an episode last week, but if we're kind of talking priorities, those are some names I like at the top of my list. That said, the Suns have their work cut out for them. None of this is going to be easy. If they could even get one of the, priority best case scenario options from any of these lists, whether that's, a Devin Carter at 22 in the draft, who's probably going to get picked higher than that and won't fall, or if they were able to get a Pritchard or somebody in a trade, or if they were even able to get Chris Dunn. I think it's like nail one at least of those things, obviously free agency being the lowest priority because it's probably going to have the least talent available. But if you could hit a home run on one of those things and then, fill out from there, you're adding one more difference-making rotation player, at least, I think you have to feel pretty good. That's kind of my mindset if I'm the Suns going in. Lock in O'Neale and get one more difference maker. We'll see what they do. That'll wrap us up. Hopefully you got all the info you need heading into the offseason. Of course, as news, rumors, and more come out, I'll have my thoughts on the details. Enjoy your Monday. Enjoy the new week. Hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. Get another episode tomorrow and beyond. And I'll catch you guys next time.